The wind blew dry that day, thick with dust and the stench of rot. The kind of day where even the sun seemed cruel, baking the cracked earth until it split open like wounded flesh. This was Hollow Creek, New Mexico, where mercy came late, if at all, and graves outnumbered living hearts. They buried her parents at dawn. No preacher spoke. No neighbors came. Just Clara May, in her dead mother's boots and a shovel she couldn't lift for long. She dug what she couldn't silence, blisters breaking, the copper sting of sweat in her eyes. She buried them shallow, because that was all the earth would allow. By noon, the landowner came. Royce Tanner sat atop a white gelding like a king before a servant, his black coat untouched by dust. He had the kind of smile that made men nervous and women small. Behind him stood two field hands with rifles, lean men, sun-bitten and quiet. "Debt don't die with the debtor," he said, adjusting his gloves. "Your pa owed me near $40, interest not included. I'll take it in labor." Clara looked up from the grave. Dirt on her dress, blood on her palms. Her face didn't flinch. "Ain't no court said that." Royce chuckled. "Ain't no court in Hollow Creek, girl." He turned the horse, slow and certain. "Fields at dawn. You miss a day, I take a finger. Miss two, it'll be a hand." And just like that, she belonged to the dirt. She worked in Royce Tanner's fields 6 days straight. The cotton tore at her fingers. The sun cooked her shoulders. Each night, she crawled back to the one room shack her father built with bare hands and stubborn pride. Now it smelled of mildew and ghost memories. She didn't cry. Crying wasted salt. The town watched. The general store clerk didn't speak when she walked in barefoot for flour. The boys at the saloon laughed when she passed. One threw a peach pit at her back. It struck her spine and bounced off. She didn't turn, didn't give them the gift of reaction. But someone saw her. From the balcony of the saloon, a man sat smoking a hand-rolled cigarette, boots propped on the rail. His hat was low, casting shadow over a scarred jaw and colder eyes. Weston Shaw had been in Hollow Creek for 3 days. Said less than 10 words total. Didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't smile. But he watched. He saw the way Clara limped on the left foot, the one she favored when kneeling to pick cotton. Saw the bruises bloom like violets on her forearms. Saw the way she stood still as stone when Royce passed her on horseback, eyes low, back straight. He'd seen it before. Once it had been his sister. Clara woke each morning before the rooster. She boiled water with fingers too swollen to bend. Ate stale bread if there was any. Walked the half-mile to the field with her jaw set, and the promise of another brutal day humming in her bones. On the 7th day it rained. The clouds came heavy, dark as coal, and cracked open without warning. The field turned to mud. The cotton was slick and soft underfoot. Royce arrived by noon. He dismounted with fury in his breath. "You stop pickin', cause a little rain." Clara stood straight. Rain streaked her face. Her dress clung to her frame. "Cotton's wet," she said simply. He slapped her. It was quick, almost professional. Not rage, routine. Like closing a door. She stumbled back, but didn't fall. Behind the rain, behind the trees, Weston watched from his horse. That night, Clara found a sack hanging from a nail by her door. Inside, a chunk of smoked meat, a folded blanket, a tin of salve. No note. She didn't smile. But she whispered a word to the dark, "Thanks." The saloon grew louder as the week bled on. Stories floated in whiskey breath about Royce's new worker. Most were lies. Some were threats. Weston stayed quiet. But when one of the field hands bragged about watching Clara bend in a rose, Weston stood. He didn't say a word, just walked across the floor, slow and certain, and punched the man so hard his head cracked the bar. Then he sat back down and lit another cigarette. No one spoke of Clara after that. One morning, Clara found Weston standing at the edge of the field. Arms crossed. No horse. Just watching. "You lost?" she asked. "No." She stared at him, chest heaving from labor, hair damp with sweat. "You looking for something?" He nodded toward the field. "Looks like you lost it." She almost laughed. "Almost. Ain't nothing to lose." He shrugged. "Then maybe something to take back." Then he left. Didn't even look back. That night, Royce rode to her cabin drunk. He kicked the door open. She met him with a poker in hand. "You think you got friends now," he hissed. "You think anyone in this town gives a damn?" She didn't answer. Just held the iron steady. He took one step forward, and a bullet snapped through the window, shattering glass and grazing his hat. He froze. Outside, in the trees, Weston held the rifle steady, smoke rising from the barrel. Royce cursed and fled, stumbling into the night. Inside, Clara lowered the poker. She whispered to the darkness again. Thanks. Hollow Creek changed that night. Just a little. Just enough. The clerk at the general store started wrapping her bread. The saloon boys looked away. And Royce Tanner, for the first time in a long time, started to sweat. Because now Clara May wasn't alone. And men like Weston Shaw didn't watch for long. They acted. Weston Shaw arrived in Hollow Creek with no fanfare, riding a dapple-gray Mustang that looked almost as worn as its rider. Dust clung to his coat like a second skin. His hat was pulled low, casting shade over a face that knew grief intimately. He checked into the upstairs room of the saloon, paid a week in advance, and spoke only when needed. Whiskey? The bartender asked. Water, Weston replied. The town shrugged him off as another drifter. Hollow Creek was where hope went to dry out, and strangers passed through like ghosts. But Weston wasn't passing through. He'd come for something. He just hadn't decided yet if it was justice or blood. Each morning, he sat on the balcony above the saloon, cigarette between his fingers, watching the town breathe. He studied Clara May's routine. The way she limped. The way she didn't beg. How she avoided Royce's gaze but never looked down. He saw her carrying a broken bucket from the well. Saw her scrape bark from a pine to start fire. Saw her silence. It reminded him of Maggie. His sister had that same kind of quiet. The kind that came after pain. The kind that built itself around wounds too deep for talk. He had buried Maggie 3 winters ago. Beaten, used, and thrown into a frozen creek by men who thought poor meant disposable. He tracked every last one of them. Buried them deeper than snow. But he never found peace. So he kept riding. And then he saw Clara. At night, the saloon roared. Laughter, broken piano keys, glass shattering against wood. Weston never joined in. He played one hand of poker just once. Won. Then folded his earnings into his coat and left the table. You don't talk much, said the dealer. Weston only nodded. You here for someone? This time, Weston did speak. Maybe. You law. Weston looked down at his hands. Scarred knuckles. A burn on the wrist. No badge. No. The dealer didn't ask again. 3 days passed. Then one night, he saw Royce Tanner dragging Clara by the arm behind the stable. Weston followed. Not fast. Not loud. Just steady. Royce's voice was low and slurred. You think you're better than your folks? They died in dirt. You live in it. Clara didn't speak. Just stared at the barn wall, like it might open. Weston stepped into the lamplight. Royce turned. Who the hell? Weston didn't say a word. Just looked at him. Something in that stare, flat, cold, endless, made Royce step back. You got no business here. Still, Weston said nothing. Royce let go. Spat. Ain't worth it. He walked off. Weston waited until his footsteps vanished. Clara looked at him. Eyes unreadable. Why? She asked. He looked toward the moon. Because someone should. After that, Clara would find small things by her door. Bandages. Apples. A clean handkerchief. Always left in silence. She never asked. He never offered. One evening, Weston stood by the fence of Royce's land, watching the sunset bleed across the cotton. Clara approached, wiping dirt from her skirt. You're not from here. No. You stayin'? He took a long moment. For now. She looked at him, eyes narrow. Men don't help women here. Not unless they want something. He met her stare. I want Royce gone. Why? His voice lowered. Because men like him think pain is theirs to give. She said nothing, but she didn't walk away. That night, Weston went to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Tully was asleep, boots on the desk, mouth open. Weston tapped the toe of his boot against the leg of the desk. Tanner. Tully blinked awake. Huh. He owns this town. Tully frowned. He pays the town. Big difference. You gonna do anything about him? Tully scratched his beard. You a lawman? No. Then why do you care? Weston paused. Someone should. Tully sighed. You're gonna get yourself shot. Weston turned to go. Then he better not miss. Later that week, Weston bought a horse blanket from the general store. As he paid, he added 2 sacks of flour and left them behind the counter. Give it to the May girl, he said. The clerk looked up. Royce finds out. Weston didn't blink. He won't. Then he walked out. Clara found the flower on her step that night. She stared at the sack for a long time. Then she looked up toward the saloon balcony where Weston sat smoking in silence. Their eyes met. Nothing was said, but something changed. That night, Weston opened a small journal in his room. Inside were names, all crossed out. He turned the page, drew a new one. Royce Tanner. He didn't cross it out. Not yet. The frost came early that year. Hollow Creek wore a gray veil of morning chill. Cotton froze on the stem, brittle and useless. Fields lay empty, hushed by the threat of snow. Clara May woke with breath fogging in her cabin, her blanket thin, her body thinner. But her spine stayed straight. Her hands, though cracked and aching, still tied her boots. Still drew water. Still picked through the splinters of a life Royce Tanner tried to bury her in. But Weston Shaw had changed something. A silence broken by presence. A violence interrupted. A man who gave without claiming. He came again to the edge of the fields. This time on horseback. This time in daylight. She saw him and didn't stop working. Just glanced. And when she looked again, he was off the horse, walking. "Cold morning," he said. She kept pulling at dead cotton stalks. "Ain't the first." He leaned against a fence post. Arms crossed, calm as dusk. "You planning to stay here forever?" She looked up, squinted. "You planning to ask questions you don't want answers to?" He smiled. "A ghost of it. I'm planning to leave." Her hands stilled. "Then why are you here?" He met her eyes. "To ask if you want to come." She laughed. "Once." Harsh and short. "I ain't going nowhere with a man I don't know." He nodded like he expected it. "Then let me show you who I am." That night, Weston returned to her cabin. Knocked once. She opened, holding a knife low behind the door. He held out a bundle, a heavy coat, boots, and jerky wrapped in wax paper. No strings. Just warmth. She hesitated. Took the coat first. "Why me?" she asked. He looked away, toward the mountains. "Because I once stood at a grave too shallow, and no one helped." She closed the door, but she didn't lock it. The next morning, Royce stood in her path, reeking of whiskey and bruised pride. "You think he's going to save you?" She didn't answer. "He's a drifter. He'll be gone by frost." Still, she didn't answer. So he grabbed her wrist. And Weston was there. Gun drawn. Voice low. "Let go." Royce turned, hand still on Clara. "You threatening me, boy?" Weston stepped closer. Pressed the barrel against Royce's ribs. "I don't threaten. I end." Royce let go. Walked off, but slower this time. Eyes watching. Measuring. Clara stood silent beside Weston. "He's going to come back harder." Weston nodded. "Then I'll be ready." That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her cot, the coat across her shoulders, knife still nearby. Then she opened her door. Weston was sitting outside, on a stump, waiting, as if he'd known. She stepped out. "Tell me about her." He didn't ask who. "Maggie," he said. "She was the only soft thing in my life. They took her." Clara sat beside him, not touching. "What happened to them?" He looked at her. "They don't breathe anymore." She nodded. "Good." 3 nights later, the barn caught fire. Clara woke to smoke and screams from the livestock. She ran barefoot, dress clinging to her, flames dancing red across her skin. Weston was already there, dragging open the gate, slapping the horses free. Fire crackled, wood snapped. Clara ran in after him. Together, they got the last mule out. When it was done, the barn was ash. Clara's hands were blistered. Weston's coat was blackened. No one saw who lit the fire. But they both knew. They sat beside the smoldering ruin. "He's trying to scare you off," she said. "He should have tried harder." She looked at his burned sleeve. "You didn't have to go in." "Yes," Weston said, "I did." Then he did something bold. He reached for her hand. Not to pull, just to hold. And she let him. When dawn came, Royce returned. This time with a sheriff's badge pinned crooked to his coat. He brought men. But Clara stepped forward. "This land is mine. You got no right here." Royce sneered. "You're a girl with dirt and a name that don't matter." She didn't flinch. "Then shoot me now." Behind her, Weston raised his rifle. "You'll have to shoot us both." A long pause. Then the sheriff, real one, appeared behind Royce. "She's right. I checked the deed. You got no hold here." Royce's smile faltered. The town had turned. One by one, his men walked away. and Royce stood alone in the snowlight. He spit at the ground. "This ain't over." Clara stepped closer. "Yes," she said, "it is." That night, she took Weston's hand again, and didn't let go. The snow came late, but it came hard. By mid-December, Hollow Creek lay beneath a cold white silence, broken only by the crunch of boots and the groan of trees beneath the weight. Smoke drifted from chimneys, and those who could stay inside did. But Clara May did not. She worked. The land, though bitter, still needed tending. Her father's tools, rusted but familiar, clung to her grip like memories. She patched the roof, chopped wood, salted meat, and every night, when the wind howled against the windows, she lit the fire herself and sat beside Weston Shaw. They didn't speak much. Didn't need to. They sat in a shared quiet, each sip of coffee or shift of boot saying enough. Trust, like thawed earth, came slow. But Royce Tanner did not sleep. He watched from afar, nursing the humiliation of power lost. The sheriff had stripped him of pretense, but not of pride. Pride doesn't die easy, and neither did Royce. On the eve of Christmas, Weston found footprints in the snow near Clara's barn. Too many. Too close. 5, he said, crouching low. Clara stood behind him, arms crossed. "Royce." He didn't answer. Didn't need to. She looked toward the woods, toward the place where pain often came from. Weston stood. "We make ready." She nodded. "We don't run." He looked at her then. A long, hard look. "No, we don't." They began with the cabin, barricaded the doors, reinforced the windows with scrap iron and nailed boards. Clara dug out her father's old scattergun. Weston cleaned his rifle like a prayer. They took turns sleeping. The others stood watch. By the third night, the wind carried something strange, silence too perfect. Then it came. 3 men crept through the snow, shadows among trees. The 4th circled near the well. The 5th lit a torch. Clara saw him first. "Now," she whispered. Weston fired once. A man dropped. Another rushed the cabin. Clara shot him point-blank through the door. The torch hit the roof, but died on the wet shingles. Chaos spun wild in the snowlight, shouts, muzzle flares, screams. Then silence again, and Royce, the last, stepped into view. "This ain't your fight, cowboy," he called. Weston stepped outside, rifle raised. "It became mine when you drew blood." Royce sneered. "She ain't worth it." Clara stepped beside Weston, gun still smoking. "You'll find out." Royce charged. The fight was brutal. Up close. No ceremony. Fists, boots, snow, and blood. Weston took a knife to the shoulder, but got the upper hand. Royce, face bruised, breath ragged, drew his pistol. Clara shot him. Right in the leg. He fell howling. Weston stood over him. "She ends this. Not me." Clara walked forward. "You took my parents. Tried to take me. Burned my barn. Brought men to kill me." Royce grinned through blood. "So, you gonna hang me?" She knelt, took his gun, and tossed it aside. "No, I'm gonna let you live with what you lost. Everything." She stood. "Crawl back to whatever hole have you. Don't ever come back." Royce, whimpering, dragged himself into the trees. The sun rose slow over Hollow Creek. For men dead in the snow. 1 fled. 2 still standing. Weston sat on the porch, binding his wound. Clara brought him coffee. "You all right?" He winced. "Will be." She sat beside him. Her hair tangled, eyes red from smoke and cold. "We won." He nodded. "Didn't feel like winning, da." She looked toward the horizon. "It never does." That afternoon, Weston buried the bodies beneath the cotton rows. Clara helped. Neither spoke over the graves. Just dirt, wind, and the heavy ache of survival. When it was done, they stood in silence. He looked at her, hand resting on the shovel. "You could come with me now, if you wanted." She looked at the house, at the scarred land, at the blood-soaked field, then at him. "No," she said, "not yet." And he nodded, because he understood. Some places need to be healed before they can be left, and some women need to finish what they started. The winter dragged on like an old injury, slow to fade, sharp in memory. Snow clung to the hills. Ice webbed over the creek beds. Hollow Creek held its breath, waiting for Royce Tanner to strike again. But he didn't. He vanished. No one saw him ride out. No word. No letter. Just silence. Some said he bled out in the hills. Others claimed he crawled east to start over under a new name. Clara didn't care. Dead or gone, he was out of her land, out of her sky. And yet, she didn't feel free. Because vengeance leaves a weight. Even when it's done right. Weston healed slow. Clara stitched his shoulder in silence, the thread trembling once between her fingers. She didn't speak, not when he flinched, not when he gritted his teeth. When it was done, she sat back. "You're lucky." He smiled through the pain. "Never been before." They shared coffee on the porch that night. The stars were sharp distant. The world felt both too big and too quiet. "You ever miss the road?" Clara asked. "Only when I forget why I left it." She looked at him. Really looked. "Why did you?" He stared ahead, jaw tight. "Because killing stops being justice if you enjoy it." Clara nodded. "I know. The town changed after the siege. The sheriff came by more often." Folks nodded to Clara in the street. The storekeeper saved her flour without her asking. No one mentioned Royce. But they all remembered. She had stood when no one else did. And Hollow Creek, brittle and slow to rise, began to respect her. In February, the thaw began. Snow turned to mud. Grass peeked through the frost. Clara started rebuilding the barn. Weston helped. They worked side by side. No words, just tools and breath, and the rhythm of nails meeting wood. It was Weston who spoke first. "You ever think about leaving?" She paused, hammer in hand. "Every day. But then I remember, if I leave now, someone else will take his place. Someone always does." He nodded. "So you're staying, until the soil remembers what it means to feed, not take." He looked at her then. Something like reverence in his eyes. "You're not like other folks." She smiled, bitter but proud. "No. I buried them." By March, the town held a gathering, a kind of spring trial of spirits. Music, stew pots, a bonfire. Clara didn't plan to go. But Weston asked her. He didn't say it like a request. He just showed up, his coat brushed, his shirt clean, holding out his hand. "Come on." She hesitated, then took it. They arrived to quiet stares, cautious nods. Someone handed Clara a cup of cider. Weston stood close, not shielding, just near. The music was slow, plucked strings and old verses. No one asked them to dance. But Clara stepped forward anyway. "You know how?" she asked. "No." She placed his hand on her waist. "Then we'll learn together." Later that night, after the fire burned low and the people thinned out, Weston and Clara walked home side by side. He spoke once. "If I asked you again to come with me, what would you say now?" She looked up at the stars. "I'd say maybe soon. Not today, but soon." He nodded, said nothing more. Sometimes peace doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it waits for you to be ready. Back at the cabin, Clara stood in the doorway. "You're not staying in the barn tonight." Weston raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" She nodded. "It's warm inside, and I don't feel like being alone." He stepped inside, and for the first time in years, Clara may close the door behind someone and did not lock it. Spring came like a slow forgiveness. Hollow Creek breathed again. The creek ran clear. Birds returned, uncertain but brave. Buds dared the branches, and the wind softened. And for the first time in years, Clara May slept without her knife. The barn stood whole again, painted, quiet. The rows where cotton once ruled now bore potatoes, onions, tomatoes, stubborn things that fed, not bled. Weston helped plant them, helped build the new fence. He didn't ask when she'd be ready. He just stayed. One morning, Clara stepped outside and found the world calm. No boots at the door, no shadow in the trees. Just Weston, splitting wood with rhythm and grace, his coat slung on a fence post. She watched him a long while before speaking. "I think I'm ready." He didn't stop chopping. "For what?" "The road." He paused, set the axe down, turned to her slowly. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yeah, but not because I need to run. Because I want to see what else there is." He stepped closer, looked into her eyes. "Then let's go." They packed light. Only what mattered. Seeds, her mother's scarf, the rifle, his knife. They saddled 2 horses, her father's mare, now strong again, and his gray Mustang. As they rode out, the town watched. Quiet, respectful. The sheriff tipped his hat. The storekeeper handed Clara a wrapped loaf of bread. No words, just a nod. They rode past Royce's old house, boarded up, silent, a monument to what cruelty leaves behind. Clara didn't look back. For weeks they followed no map. The land unfolded in wide golden waves. They slept by creeks beneath stars. They didn't speak of Hollow Creek, didn't speak of the dead, just rode. At night, Weston told her stories. His voice was low, almost unsure. Tales of mountains that smoked, of deserts that sang, of a girl once braver than the world knew. Clara listened, then told her own. Quiet truths. Of childhood, of pain, of what it meant to survive a world built for men. He never interrupted. He just listened. They reached a ridge one morning, after a long climb. Below it spread a valley full of wildflowers, tall grass, and a cabin half sunk into a hill. Clara pulled her reins. This it? Weston nodded. Built it with my sister. Never had reason to go back. She looked at him. Then at the cabin. We build again. Together. He dismounted. So did she. They stood a long moment, side by side. Then they walked down into the valley. Weeks passed. They planted, built, repaired. They laughed sometimes. Not loud, but true. Weston carved her name into the doorframe. Clara carved his beside it. No last names. Just initials. CMWS. Enough. One night, she stood by the fire, staring into the flames. Do you think we're healed? Weston came beside her, resting a hand lightly at her back. No, but we're healing. She nodded. That's enough. They watched the fire burn low, the stars above sharp and kind, and neither of them locked the door. Not anymore.